Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. This is Maurice Beasley here coming at you. And our next lecture here in our series is lecture number 3, color theory. So I'm going to share my screen in a couple minutes and we're going to go over the PowerPoint presentation first to take a look at what's going to be in there. And then I'm going to walk you through what we have in the full of our lecture and what you have to download and take a look at and that sort of thing, and kind of go over the details of that and what we're going to be seeing. So give me a minute and we will get started. Going here to our presentation first. So, um, here is the presentation part of our class. So we're going to go over color theory and color management as it relates to Photoshop in our class here. Um, we're going to be looking at color theory in the idea of, hold on, why is it not moving? There we go. Looking at color theory in the guise of how Photoshop applies color theory to everything. So we're going to look at a couple of websites that I'm going to talk about when it comes to color theory that's in our lesson plan that you will be able to take a look at and kind of dive a little bit deeper down that rabbit hole of color theory because it's a vast ocean when it comes to color theory. So you want to be careful and not get too far down the road. Creating color schemes well, actually, number 2, configuring your color settings within Photoshop and by extension Adobe Bridge that will cover all the rest of the Adobe programs like your illustrators and InDesigns and other programs there within the whole Adobe family, where you have where you're saying to the computer, this is the monitor that I'm using, this is the printer that I'm using. So I want to make sure the colors are described based on that. So that way anything you're doing is color is based on your monitor's output or your printer's output. So you get the correct color representation no matter what. And if you're working with a team of people, being able to share that color profile with others on the team or making sure everybody gets theirs set up the same way. Creating color schemes and mastering Adobe Color. So creating color schemes, you have a project, and for creating that project, you're going to have certain colors that you need to use. So there's questions you need to ask. Make sure you do certain steps within these programs to create those colors and make sure those colors are saved and held on to for your project. So I'll show you how in Photoshop you would do it. Those of you taking the vector class, you'll see how to do the same thing for Illustrator. Those of you taking page layout, you'll see the same thing for InDesign. It's the same process in all 3 programs for creating that color and then for saving that color as well. It should be the same procedure you do across the board. Adobe Color is one online program that you can use that's from Adobe to build those color schemes. Usually it's going to be 5 colors total for that project, but it could be more if you want to. So I'm going to show you how to go into Adobe Color to do it, but I'm also going to show you one other program that I like just as well, if not better in certain situations, that you could use. It's called Coolers. And you'll see the website so you can see what I'm talking about there. All right. Physics, the physics of color. Color is the visual perception of light wavelengths. Objects absorb those some wavelengths and reflect others back to you, creating what you see as color. So essentially, you see things through your eyes, and it's here's the science behind things. Your eyes perceive light. So they perceive light. So the light spectrum around their entire world that the sun creates and that artificial lights create, that light spectrum bounces off of everything. So when it hits a particular thing, some of that wavelength of color is going to be absorbed. The rest is reflected back to your eyes that perceive that color. Now, your brain is a thing that actually uh, processes what that light values that it perceives, that your eyes perceive, and it processes it and turns it into what you know as a color. Now, You know this particular thing is blue or green or black or yellow or red because someone has told you that's what that color you're perceiving is. So if you were a child, a baby, and what we understand as blue, if you were told that that was red all of your life, at this point, 18, 19, 20 plus years, you would argue somebody forever that that is red. That is not blue. That is called red. That color is called red, not blue. And everybody else is saying, no, that's blue, because that's what you're taught over years. Now, why is that important? Well, people who are colorblind, we'll start with them. Those people who have different types of color blindness just have a short circuit between what the eyes perceive and what the brain interprets. People who come from different cultures than yours, they're going to associate different colors with different things in the world, that you will see as something different. It's not that you're seeing the color different. It's just because of your culture, because of the way you've grown up, because of what you've been related to as far as the color, you may perceive that color as being different than somebody else. And that's not a bad thing. It's just the way it is. Now, certain definitions, hue that you'll see a lot. Hue is the pure color itself. The red, the yellow, the blue, the green, whatever, that pure value of that color. So hue means color. What is that color? Saturation is pretty much the intensity of that color. So increasing the saturation increases the intensity of that red or green or blue or yellow. Or you can lower the saturation so it lowers that intensity. So it's not as bright and vibrant. It's a little duller, almost getting to the point where it's turning gray. Okay. Value is the lightness or the darkness of the color. Brightness is another term for value, or tone is another term for value. So a light blue versus a dark blue, that's the value of it, the lighter or darker. Versus that saturation value of blue, it could be a brighter blue, but it's still dark. That sometimes doesn't make sense in most cases, but that's just how it goes by definition of the words. Let's move forward here. Color relationships. You have your primary colors, which is your red, yellow, and blue. Your eyes perceive red, yellow, and blue color wavelengths. And our brain stitch those three wavelengths together to build the colors that we see and that we perceive. Now, computers. Computer systems that pick up or project color in values of red, green, and blue. Not red, yellow, and blue, red, green, and blue. So RGB, red, green, blue. That's the three primary colors to most electronic devices. What does that mean? Well, why is that happening? Well, somebody hit a one instead of a zero. That's the joke that I use for that. It's kind of almost unknown why it went from from red, yellow, and blue, which is what we have naturally, to red, green, and blue. But that's also the explanation of why certain cameras that pick up color, when they pick up the color that you're looking at, it's going to be perceived differently. So the electronic device is going to see that color a little different than you would naturally. And it becomes weird outputs sometimes, or different looking outputs from what you actually see. Secondary colors. Secondary colors are a combination of the red, green, and blue. Or red, yellow, and blue. So combination of red and yellow together is going to make an orange. Combination of blue and yellow together is going to make a green. Combination of red and blue together is going to make, most people call it purple. And that's another rabbit hole to jump down. That purple doesn't exist because purple is just a certain combination blend between the red and the blue. Is it exactly at 50 and 50? Yes, it is, but some people will call that violet instead of blue, instead of purple. They'll call that color violet, where it's 50% red, 50% blue. When you go to, 51-49, then it starts to get the purple, and it's a blue purple now versus a red purple. And, it's a weird thing that happens. But again, like I said, the rabbit hole goes deep when it comes to color, and I'm trying to just touch the surface level stuff as much as possible for right now. When you do other combinations, then you start getting tertiary colors. Tertiary colors are basically taking the red, green, and blue, or the red, yellow, and blue, the green, orange, and purple, or violet, as you want to call it, and start creating other combinations. Blue, green, yellow, yellow, purple, or yellow, green, and seeing what combinations you get out of those with those colors. Is that important to you? Well, it depends, because if you have a color wheel, so if you go to an art store like a Michael's or Blick's or someplace like that, and actually buy a color wheel that's of any good quality, you're going to see these primary colors. They're going to be listed out, but then you'll also see the secondary and tertiary colors listed as well. It won't just be a big rainbow color wheel going on. It'll actually be separated out with the different millions of different color combinations that are out there. And there's a lot. There's 16.7 million different color combinations. We talked about that in the first class. All right, so color harmonies. What are color harmonies? These are colors that on that same color wheel that have a different, either by mathematical numbers or by just their position on the wheel, complementary to each other, or they work with each other. So complementary colors are colors that are opposite on that color wheel, on the opposite value of the color wheel. So I don't have a wheel in front of me to be able to show this to you, but we'll see it a little bit later on. I have within Photoshop, I can show you that color wheel, an example of it, and you could see what the opposite of one particular color is. That'll be its complement. Analogous colors, these are colors that are adjacent to each other, that are right next to each other in the color wheel, that are analogous to each other. And then you got triadic colors, they're equally spaced around the color wheel, and this is where the math comes in. There are subsections to these. These are just the main three, but there are subsections to analogous, complementary, and triadic that go into different spots on complementary colors. And I say spots, which is basically different positions on the wheel. Usually a color wheel is divided out by degrees. So you have a 360-degree color wheel, 360 degrees on the wheel, and depending on that degree position, in comparison to where you start. So your primary color, the color you start off with, has a particular degree, is at a particular degree number, and so many degrees to the left or the right, positive, negative, will get you to the next color. And is that color a triadic value? Is it analogous? Is it complementary? Is it dimetric? That's another term that's used where a color doesn't match with that one, where it's not a matching color, but it's at a particular position on the wheel, and those two colors don't work with each other. Versus the complementaries and analogous and triadic values, they work with each other. You can put that color with its triadic color, and the two colors will work well together. They stand out from each other, and you could see them fairly easy. Give you an example. Red and blue, those two colors they're analogous because they're next to each other, but they're also triadic colors. But also red and blue work good against each other, meaning that I could take something blue and put something red up against it, or vice versa, and you would be able to see it. So red background with blue letters. Depending on the value of that blue, you would be able to see that red and blue very well together. However, a color that is dimetric to red and blue would be its combination color, which is purple or violet. If you took that purple or violet and put it up against red or blue, the properties of that red or blue would start to bleed out of that purple. And so now it's hard to see that purple color against that red or blue. Again, depending on the values, because it's pulling the blue or the red value of that, or the blue or red tone of that purple out of that into the red. So it makes it hard to see. And it's weird. Again, me talking about it versus you seeing it, it'll help out in the process. So we'll take a look at that later on. Color psychology. This is talking about the different values of color. You have warm and cool colors. Warm colors are usually going to be your reds and your orange and your yellow colors. Generally, they tend to be an energetic color. They make you hungry. They help you pay attention. Those type of color combinations. Whereas cooler colors, the blues, the greens, purple color values, they're a little calmer. They help you sleep. Blue is one of those colors that is the shortest wavelength, so it's the easiest for us to perceive. That's why the sky is blue. That's why water reflected off of that sky is blue. That's why we tend to want to be under the blue lights more than being under the harsher red lights. But at the same time, red lights are supposed to have like a healing property. That's the energizing part of it. Whereas a blue lights can help you go to sleep at night, but also too much blue light, like coming out of your cell phones, uh, give you a hard time of going to sleep. So if you have the TV on at nighttime, you have your computer screen on at night. If you're in your room with if your bedroom has your computer screen or your phone is in your hand while you're trying to go to sleep, it's harder to go to sleep because of that blue light coming out and hitting you. So that becomes bad. And some people have blue light sensitivity because of that. And so you have red lenses, like a reddish lens to kind of balance out that blue light. It's weird, but it's that sort of thing that starts happening when it comes to these colors. Cultural considerations. In my live class, I do word associations with color. Like if I say wedding to some people, you think white for the white dress that the bride would wear. Well, other cultures, white is not the primary color. It's some other color. It could be red, it could be orange, it could be blues, it could be greens. Same thing with the word funeral. Funeral, most people think black because of mourning and death and that sort of thing. That may not be the color in another culture. It may be a brighter, more vibrant color, or it could be white, indicating, a transition from, to another plane or to another world of existence. So it's those things that factor into color as well. And that factors into everything when it comes to color. It's a very cool thing, when you're dealing with colors and trying to understand psychology, and especially when you're dealing with things like logo building and branding and that sort of thing. But it can be very daunting because you will design something that will work great for this one culture, but then when you show that same exact design to another culture, they want to kill you. They want to fight you. They think that you're the devil. Give you a good example of that, McDonald's. Those of you old enough to remember the clown, Ronald McDonald. They stopped using Ronald McDonald because in certain countries, clowns are the devil. They're demons. So if McDonald's wants to expand to that country, they can't use Ronald McDonald. So they stop using it all over the place. So that it's things like that that can happen. And, that's just an example when it comes to branding and stuff, but color comes into a factor of that. All right. Setting up your color management. This is one of the things we're going to be doing inside of Photoshop, going into what is called color settings. And in the color settings, we're going to be setting up our working space. For RGB, we're going to set it up to be a particular thing. And what they're saying here, Adobe RGB is for print and sRGB is for the web. Not necessarily true, but that's what they were created for. And we'll get a little bit deeper into that. Then you also got your CMYK set up as well. That's for print specifically. Cyan, magenta, yellow, and black as those four colors. We talked about that before as well. And then you're going to set up your color policy that if you open a file that does not have the color profile that you have set for yourself, what do you want to have happen? I'm going to tell you exactly what you should set up that would work the best, and then show you an example of what happens with that when you open something that doesn't match what your profile is set to. What happens and how do you set that up? And then how to actually change your color profiles up when you have a different project that has a different output than what you've already got set. It's easy to do. It's just a matter of doing it. Once you get that set up in Photoshop, now you want your other Adobe programs, as well as your operating system, as well as some other competing programs to Adobe, to use those color settings. So Adobe Bridge is a way where you can synchronize with the other programs those color settings. And it's an easy thing to do. It's this 1, 2, 3 step, exactly what it shows here. Open up Bridge, go to Creative Suite color settings, and then from there, choose the color setting that you just made in Photoshop, and then tell it to share it. Done. There's nothing to it at that point. Then we're going to talk about this Adobe Color here. Now, Adobe Color is one program out of a bunch of them that's available online to create these 5 color or more color schemes. These are what you're going to be using for your projects. You will have a primary color for that project, whatever it may be. There could be actually two primary colors, and then you'll have accent colors, colors that will be complementary to those one or two colors that you will use throughout the project. If you're thinking like a website, you would have a primary color for the background color, maybe a secondary color, maybe for the background, for the other background color of the page. And then you'll have these complementary colors that would be like, say, the color of the text, color of a border on a box, the color of a button, anything like that. So you would come up with these things, either yourself come up with it, or somebody will be working with you to help you come up with these things. Creating these color schemes are actually kind of simple. There's different ways you could do it. There's a real good way is uploading an image. So a lot of times when you're talking to a client or talking to your boss, you can ask them what their favorite colors are. That would be a good way to do it. You could take colors out of an existing photo and use those colors there by extracting those colors out how you need to, or you can use that as a starting point and pull those colors and then go from there. So a lot of times when you're talking to a client or talking to your client, talking to your shareholders, you'd be like, hey, what colors do you want to use? Oh, we want to use red and green and yellow. Okay. Green and yellow probably are not a good idea, but they could work with red. And then you could talk to them that way about it. And then you'd be like, okay, what value of that red or that green or that yellow? Oh, just any red, green, and yellow. No, 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 no. We need to come up down and narrow down to the exact color. Because the more you know the exact color, the better off you're going to be, because different devices electronically are going to show those colors a little different. If you just come up with any old color, that means you're just letting any colors work, and that's not good. Printing, different printing devices, different mediums that you're printing on will show the color differently. So the more accurate you get, the more, I hate saying it like this, but it is true, the more of an ass you are of getting that color exactly right by the numbers, the more than likely you're going to have more consistent color across the board. Your electronic output will be more consistent, and then your printing output will be a lot more consistent on different things. Companies like Coca-Cola, they're real big on making sure the colors are exactly right, because if they're not correct, they're going to come down on you. So, and they're not representing that company. So, in the eyes of branding and marketing for a company, the colors have got to be exactly right. So don't ever be lax about picking the colors, because you need to make sure that these things are correct and as correct as possible. And then when you're dealing with others in your group, you need to make sure that you can export these colors out and share them and make sure that they have the exact correct colors. Adobe's real good for that. They have these things called libraries where you can take the whole color scheme that you build online and actually have it as a library item. And then that library item can be shared with other people, not just yourself across different programs and across different files, but with other people on the team. And it's just a simple file that you send to them. And they'd be like, hey, what are those colors that you're using for that project? Here's the file. Take that file and load it up, and then you'll have them. And they go, well, I don't know how to do that. Okay, then you're fired. We'll get somebody else to take your place that knows what they're doing. Or you can give them the directions on how to load it up instead of firing them, because that may not be part of your job description. See, I say these things as jokes, but online, I got nobody laughing at me, so I can't really tell if they're working or not, but I'll just bump myself. Anyway, there will be an assessment at the end of this lecture that'll be available. This presentation here will help you through some of it, but some of these other elements that we're about to go through will show you the rest of it. So give me a second. I am going to share my other screen.